Guys, this time of the year, I love having these types of conversations, but if you could do me one solid, no one watches these videos. These are not popular videos, and I'm okay not doing popular things, but it makes me pay a heavy price with the YouTube algorithm. So if you could, please give me a thumbs up, give me a like, hit that like button, because what it will do is let other Chiefs fans know about this video, and hopefully where I will falter in the algorithm, I will prosper by being in front of new sets of eyes. By the way, here's something interesting that I noticed today. I got this article from the Arrowhead Pride Arrowhead Lines suggestions every day. Well, I guess they're not suggestions unless you do make content, but so one thing I noticed about that, this article is from Arrowhead Addict. Arrowhead Addict, you would imagine, are a direct competitor with Arrowhead Pride. There are a couple of different websites that have popped up over the past few years that are direct competitors with Arrowhead Pride, and graciously, Arrowhead Pride still sort of hosts their articles. One thing they don't do, which would be very easy if you were a website like Arrowhead Pride, they don't do anything with us YouTubers. They could embed our actual videos onto, and not just mine. I'm not making a statement for me, but I think that the ecosystem on YouTube is massive and is worthy of the same type of Arrow headlines platform that print publications, or not print publications. These are what is known as missing link media, right? The websites, kind of the missing link era of media. So maybe put a bug in Arrowhead Pride's ear that they should start doing they should, in their Arrowhead headlines. I am stumbling all over today. In their Arrow headlines articles, give us YouTubers some love. But anyway, the question for today's video is Chris Jones going to be a Hall of Famer? I disagree. I'm just going to put this out there out front. I disagree with the premise of the article. The article is titled, "The Hall of Fame Door is Open for Chris Jones if he finishes the job." Subtitled, "What More Does Chris Jones Have to Do to Get into Canton?" From Arrowhead Addict by Felix Johnson, we get the following. Chris Jones is on a Hall of Fame path if he finishes what he started. Pro Football Reference's Hall of Fame monitor keeps track of player statistics and accomplishments dating back to 1955. 100 is the average score for any Hall of Fame player. Currently, Jones' score sits at 66.55, a far cry from the average defensive tackle score of 102. Some players from yesteryear, like Steve McMichael and Chiefs legend Curly Culp, have much lower scores than Jones, but the likes of Donald and Bob Lilly have made the barrier of entry much higher. I'm going to tell you why that's not true. Jones needs to score about 40-ish points on the Hall of Fame monitor to cross the average score. He only needs about 11.5 sacks to get to the imaginary average defensive tackle score. A routine 2025 for the dominant lineman would likely put him in that territory. Jones also has yet to bring home his very own Defensive Player of the Year. So if he nabs one of those, his Hall of Fame case would be cemented. Similarly to Eli Manning's Hall of Fame case, Jones' singular impact in the most memorable games of all time may emphasize his case. The defensive tackle's influence on the entire roster is only matched by Travis Kelce's and supplanted by only Patrick Mahomes. The way NFL teams as a whole have crafted their defensive lines have changed due in part to Chris Jones and how phenomenal he has been. How does a player like that not belong in Canton? So my premise, the premise of my argument, is that if Chris Jones wakes up tomorrow, counts all of his money, and decides, I don't want to get hit in the face for a living anymore, and retires, he's in the Hall of Fame. Chris Jones, upon retirement, will automatically be a favorite to be in the Hall of Fame. Now, here's Chris Jones. Here's what the article is referencing. Hall of Fame monitor 66.55, 19th among defensive tackles. Average Hall of Fame for a defensive tackle is 102.36. This is with 80 plus sacks to his credit. The big thing for me with Chris Jones, is rings. Chris Jones has been the best player on a Chiefs defense that has gone to 5 Super Bowls. Probably, so maybe you want to make the argument that Chris Jones has been the best player on the Chiefs for 3 Super Bowls and 2 rings. I think it's possible to make the argument that as of the past 2 Super Bowls, Trent McDuffie was the best defensive player. I think it's arguable. I still probably give that to Chris Jones simply because of the fact that the opposing offenses have to do so much in order to guarantee that Chris Jones does not wreck their game plan. But I think undoubtedly, I think that all of us would put our entire life savings down on a bet for who was the best Chiefs defensive player for 3 of those Super Bowls and 2 of those rings. Now, in addition to that, he does hold an NFL record. It's not the most consequential record, it's not the greatest record, but it's something of a Cal Ripken-esque record for defensive linemen, 11 consecutive games with a sack. That, to my research, is an NFL record. So, best player on several defensive Super Bowl teams, 3 rings, 2 where he was the best player, and a minor NFL record, tell me that probably Chris Jones is headed for the Hall of Fame. Let me introduce you to someone from the 2024 Hall of Fame class. Devin Hester. I scrolled too far there. Don't pay attention to the man behind the mask there. Devin Hester, wide receiver and kick returner, is in the Hall of Fame through the 2024 NFL Hall of Fame class. A PFF monitor score of 48.4, which the average Hall of Fame wide receiver is a 100.46. Clearly, Devin Hester is not in the Hall of Fame for being a wide receiver. Clearly, Devin Hester is in the Hall of Fame for being a kick returner. Probably, Devin Hester is in the Hall of Fame for his play in the playoffs. The biggest stage, the brightest lights. Devin Hester made things happen. Maybe not enough to get that ring, by the way. Now, the article in question had mentioned Steve Mongo McMichael. So it says this. 100 is the average score for any Hall of Fame player. Currently, Jones' score sits at 66.55, a far cry from the average defensive tackle score of 102. Some players from yesteryear, like Steve McMichael and Chiefs legend Larry Culp, have much lower scores than Jones, but the likes of Donald and Lilly have made the barrier for entry much higher. So if I told you that player X and player Y have made the barrier for entry much higher, you would say, well, that means that player X and player Y are in the Hall of Fame after Steve Mongo McMichael. Right? Because you raise the bar as you pass the bar. Well, Steve Mongo McMichael is a Hall of Famer, but Steve McMichael became a Hall of Famer in 2024. Steve McMichael's 60.18 Hall of Fame score is from last year's class. Chris Jones, who presumably will play this next season, has a score 6 points higher already than Steve McMichael. Now, Steve McMichael, probably what got him in the Hall of Fame is that he is a one-time Super Bowl winner, but also he wrestled Sting in the WCW. And also his son, Sting, whose son played for the Kansas City Chiefs for a short while. Sting from Nebraska, I believe. His son went to a small college and was a training camp body for the Kansas City Chiefs 1 year as a UDFA. I believe that's what happened. It's been a long time. Now, I wouldn't want to present this argument without having a counterclaim available. The counterclaim to Chris Jones being in the Hall of Fame, if he retires tomorrow, is Rodney Harrison. Rodney Harrison, who was a top-tier member at his position in the league for a very long time, but maybe was not the most productive player stats-wise. However, Rodney Harrison has 2 Super Bowl rings. Rodney Harrison retired in 2008, and he is not in the Hall of Fame. He has a Hall of Fame score of 48.78. He was, however, a finalist in 2024. I do believe that Rodney Harrison ends up in the Hall of Fame. So I think that should Chris Jones, just like Patrick Mahomes, 2 Super Bowls ago, I think Patrick Mahomes could have called it quits and been in the Hall of Fame. Chris Jones, today, could call it quits and end up in the Hall of Fame. I don't think he does. I think Chris Jones plays several more seasons and accumulates sacks along the way. And in fact, we might see a return to form for Chris Jones. Chris Jones fell off pretty drastically last season with his statistical output, but that is because the opposing offenses didn't have to concentrate on anyone on that defensive line with the exception of Chris Jones. George Karlaftis is a good player, but he's not someone that's going to put fear in an opposing offensive coordinator or an opposing offensive line. He's productive, but he's not a terror out there. Chris Jones is an absolute terror. So, yes, I do believe that Chris Jones right now is a Hall of Famer. That is what I have for this video. If you like or appreciate what it is that I do here, hitting the like button really does help me out, as it tells YouTube to share this video with other Kansas City Chiefs fans. If you find yourself here by chance but not design, the Chiefs are the only thing I talk about on this channel, dropping multiple videos every single week. And as always, I hope to have you back for the next one.